Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video, and I am very excited to have with us today attorney Melissa Bower. She is with the Stewart Law Group out of Phoenix, Arizona, and they are a family law firm, and she is here to tell us about herself and a little bit about how she handles family law and what she sees out there. We're very excited to welcome you to the show for the first time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to become a lawyer in the first place?
Well, in all honesty, it was one of those things that I was always told I should be a lawyer, and therefore I became a lawyer. I went to law school after graduating from undergrad. And then as I evolved through my law school career, I realized it's really where I needed to be. Law school was one of the first places that I really, truly felt challenged, and that I was getting, gaining knowledge that I was never gaining before. And then I actually never, ever intended on practicing family law. That was the furthest thing from my initial thoughts of my career. I was originally going to move on to more of the environmental law aspect of the law and really enjoyed that. But then I moved to Philadelphia for a year with my then fiance, and I got a clerkship with a family court judge out there, and just absolutely fell in love with the profession and that area of law.
Wow, that's a great story. And it's good to see that you have found your place. You've found the place that you love to be, and you've been here all this time. So I'm sure that within the years that you've been practicing in the family law area, that you've seen a lot. And I'm wondering, what are some of the questions that people tend to ask you first when they come in for that first consultation and they are just now, either they found out they're getting divorced, it was, might have been a surprise, it might be something that they're planning on doing in the future. But what are some of the things that people ask first, and what do you tell them?
Great question. Obviously, everybody's case is a little bit different. You have people that come in who haven't anticipated that they're going to be going down this road, and they are blindsided, for lack of a better word. Some people have been planning it for some time, and they knew that this was going to be the eventual end of their relationship, whether short or long. The first thing I always recommend them doing is making sure that they're emotionally ready for this proceeding. It can be a very emotionally draining process, and the stress that it causes can be really difficult. So being emotionally prepared and actually ready to do this, whether that mean exhausting your options for trying to reconcile your marriage through marriage counseling or individual counseling. Also from a perspective of being ready for the gathering of information component of a divorce case, making sure you have all the information prepared before you actually decide to make these changes in your life, because it can be very difficult to gather some information that you may not be able to obtain otherwise. So those are the first things I really recommend: emotionally ready and actually ready to a certain extent of having some information and knowledge before you actually make this really, really big, important decision for your life.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because even the most intelligent and well put together people may not know what the assets are and what their spouse is making. There's no way of knowing what's hidden. There are ways to try to search it out, but you probably find people coming in and you're asking them simple questions that they don't know the answers to, and they should, or what they think it is completely wrong. Do you find that half the people are surprised when they start going through the process?
Most definitely. A lot of people, we tend to form typical boundaries in a relationship and can create different roles within the relationship. So therefore, one party may not know certain aspects of their marriage because they provided the level of trust to the other spouse. They took care of X, Y, and Z, and then they took care of A, B, and C. That's very normal. It's what partners typically do. They divide and conquer, especially when you have kiddos involved. You tend to do that divide and conquer role. And then what you're going through a divorce or starting a divorce process, and you don't know what kind of retirement assets your husband or your wife have, or you don't know your children's medical history or school and things of that nature, partially just by the functions of your roles that you have created in your relationship. And so one thing that we really do here is we really try to have our clients hit the ground running on trying to gather that information so that they are informed. And the more informed you're going to be during your litigation or even through a mediation process, the more informed that you're going to be, the better off everybody's going to be in the long run. And there's going to be more comfort and more likely more amicability in the long run as well.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because it's definitely an emotional situation, and, having it be that in addition to not knowing what your family's been doing, especially when one person's been less than honest, or maybe they both are less than honest, and this stuff just comes out, and people start getting very emotional about it. With that in mind, when the breakup happens, sometimes explosive things go on, like, hey, I'm moving out. I mean, those are like, there are some big mistakes that people make, and sometimes it can cost you money for years to come, or it could cost you a huge lump sum, like if you move out and you shouldn't. I mean, what are some of those mistakes that people make that you think are the most costly?
Well, there really aren't any specific, hey, you cannot do X, Y, and Z mistake type things that I can think of. Everyone has I'm going to give you the lawyer answer of, it depends. So for example, like moving out of the marital residence, sometimes that's what you need to do to preserve your mental, physical safety. And so sometimes that's what you need to do. And sometimes it's not a good decision. So I think having well-informed decisions, whether that be provided with help of your attorney or your therapist, or, not necessarily Google, of course, but having that making those informed decisions, I think will help you with those quote unquote mistakes. One of the things that I really recommend you doing, especially when you have counsel, is before you're going to make a big decision, consult with your attorney beforehand. Don't consult with us after the fact when the decision has already been made, or you've already told, your soon to be ex, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and then you're creating more problems than necessarily may need to happen because your choice may not be the right choice for your situation at that time. So consulting with your counsel beforehand, especially before you make those big decisions, is a really important thing for you to do. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes, to be honest with you, if I can, piggyback off of our previous question line. You not assuming that you don't need to talk to your attorney about a certain issue or think of, brainstorm something out. I think not doing that and making those rash decisions, typically they're done out of emotion, and not having a more thought out plan beforehand.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there was one that I was thinking of, and I think almost if you have anything in writing, then it's okay. If you have it in writing that everybody knows, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not going to cost me the house if I move out. It doesn't mean that I'm abandoning my asset, that kind of a thing. It's certainly having some of those things in writing is really good, but if you can talk about, what would not be good to have in writing. I mean,
I've seen some doozies on that one, to be honest with you.
I knew you had.
I think one of the most important things, especially in this day and age, we have most of our communication is done electronically. It's so much easier to sit behind a phone or a computer and, just have warfare with the other person. So I always tell my clients when I see these communications come in, because I see it after the fact, hey, I need you to ratchet that down. I need you to look at this more of a business transaction and a business communication, as opposed to an emotional communication with your soon-to-be spouse, soon-to-be ex, your former boyfriend, former girlfriend. If you just approach it more from a business perspective, as you'd be talking to your boss. Would you say those things to your boss? Most definitely not. You would not say those things to your boss. There's no way you would do that. So don't do it now, because the court is eventually going to see these communications. And if they see every expletive in the world and name calling and berating and all those kinds of things, it may not necessarily impact an order that may come into play for decision making or parenting time. And it may, but it may not. But it also decreases your credibility. And if you're in front of a judge, the last thing you want is for the judge to not like you and find that you are not a credible, upstanding person. And you probably are. You are probably a really, really, really good person. You're just in a really, really, really bad moment and bad stage of your life. When I was clerking back eons ago, I asked my judge, when she was transferring over to criminal, I was like, oh my gosh, are you afraid of working with the criminals and being on the criminal bench? And she goes, I'm more afraid of the family bench. And I go, why? And she goes, the people on the family bench, they're really, really good people, but they're at the worst time of their life. And so a lot of them just they are feeling such ugly emotions, and therefore they're not able to act rationally. Criminals are more likely than not very good people, but they're on their best behavior at that moment because they don't want to get the full punishment. So, and I carry that a lot with my clients. When I see them getting really upset, I understand you're upset. I understand you're frustrated. I get it. Take my lawyer hat off and put my wife hat on. I totally hear you, and I hear your frustrations, but not the right way to communicate it. So those communications are super important.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I have heard people's advice be like, not even just your boss, but pretend that the judge is going to see every single thing, because they may.
They will. And that's going to be one of the first pieces of evidence that would probably be used to show that, you have an inability of co-parenting or, whatever issue that might be coming up. Just keep it simple.
So what would your advice be? And you just mentioned kiddos a few times. And sometimes a breakup, you're not even going through a divorce, but there's a breakup and there are kids involved. So whether you're going through a divorce or not, kids make things much more complicated. And what are some of the things that you would say to make it easier for the kids, and some of the advice around, what you should do when kids are involved in this breakup?
Yeah, unfortunately, the kiddos tend to get intentionally or unintentionally caught in the middle. And that is a really, really hard thing. You're going to be co-parenting with this person for the rest of your lives. Whether your children are 18 or they're going to be 35, 40 years old, you're still going to be co-parenting to some certain extent. Yes, you're not legally required to, make decisions for them anymore or anything like that, but you're going to have some kind of co-parenting relationship with your, spouse or ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend for the rest of your life. And if you can find a way to move past your frustration and your anger with that person, who's going to be better off? Your kids. And not having them what I call collateral damage. You don't intend for them to be hurt in the mix of all of this stuff, but they tend to get caught up in the middle of it. Even the most well-intended parents, sometimes the kids just get caught up in it. And if you can do your best to try to reduce that, I think that's one of the most important things. Often we have really young kids in this situation. They're not able to emotionally process a lot of this stuff that's going on. They're confused, they're frustrated, whatever is going on, and they can't articulate it in the same way an adult can. We can go out and get, talk to our buddies, or, talk to our friend on the phone, or whatever we need to do to help vent and, address our emotional stressors. The kiddos don't have that ability as easily as we do. And to help reduce the stress upon them, that's on the parents. I think a lot of that is on the parents, to create that environment for those kids and put them above and beyond everything else. I think is one of the most important things for them to do. I know sometimes it's hard to do. There could be domestic violence situations, there could be substance abuse situations, and there's times that the kiddos are going to have to be involved to a certain extent, but to reduce that collateral damage, I think, is really important in the long run for most families. Obviously, there's always unique situations that, change that dynamic.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And what I love about the court systems is typically they are trying to do the best thing for the children, and they are weighing the options. But I mean, if one parent is going to move and it's going to cause this kid's world to be turned upside down more than it already is by divorce, they're probably not going to let that happen. And they're going to make sure that there's enough money so that the kid is provided for, no matter which parent they end up with, whoever needs it, just to make sure that, the children are taken care of and that their best interest is definitely, and they don't like it when the parents are, nasty in court. That is one way to ensure that your ex is going to get more of what they want than you if you go in there acting like a jerk.
Most definitely. And our court system, it's the system that we have, but in general, it is an imperfect system. And also the standards, especially when it pertains to kids, are incredibly subjective. So for example, in Arizona, we have the best interest of the children standard. Well, what does that really mean? What you may think is in the best interest of your child, Erica, might be different than what I think versus what the judge may think. And they're all reasonably and rationally based. However, they may drastically differ from each other just based on our own personal experiences and our dynamics and things like that. So another reason why I think, especially when you have kids, if the parents are able to work between themselves to reach appropriate resolutions for your kids, everybody will be better off, because you're not having somebody who's going to get to know your family for a couple of hours at best in a question and answer type of proceeding. So they're not going to really understand the full dynamic of your case and your family in the last X number of years of your relationship. They're not going to really get to know your kid per se, or your kids. They're not going to understand everything. And to leave that decision making to that person, even the judges in our system will sit there and say, I'm the last resort for those things. I don't want to be the one making those decisions. Of course they will, and they have to, but nobody really walks out of that situation thoroughly content with the decisions that they make. If you guys can make those decisions as the parents, that's typically the best result for the kids.
As difficult as that might be sometimes. Well, tell me, you were talking about something very interesting before we came on, and that was really, what is the biggest pivoting point in a divorce case or a breakup? And it may happen after everything is finalized by the court.
Yes, definitely. So one thing that I find really interesting in a lot of cases, parents, they may go through the proceeding or they're doing really well and they're having a really good co-parenting relationship. And, there might be bumps and bruises throughout the dynamic, but overall it's been going relatively well. And then all of a sudden the temperature starts to change. The dynamic starts to change in the relationship. And more often than not, when I hear that come in, I have a client come into me and say, we were doing really, really good. And, we had some issues, but all of a sudden things just went absolutely haywire and I don't understand. My immediate question is, who got the new boyfriend or the new girlfriend or the new significant other or is getting remarried, something like that. There's a relationship change, is there not? And they look at me, they're like, yeah, how did you know? And I go, because typically that's that happens quite often. Now, should it? No, it probably shouldn't. But, we have new people that are coming into our lives. There's different influences. They may have their own family dynamics with, ex spouses and significant others and things of that nature. And they're influencing that. And I think one thing, if you can try to do that as a parent, let's say you have a new significant other coming in, helping to, again, mitigate that collateral damage that happens to those kiddos. It goes back, everything in my opinion goes back to, when you have kid cases, goes back to trying to reduce their collateral damage to the dynamic. If you can sit there and go, you know what, we were doing really good before. Now we may have things that we could do better and tweak and whatnot, but not having other people exercise significant undue influence on the co-parenting relationship. But also the fact is, you need to somewhat respect that there are going to be new people in your kiddo's life. More likely than not, that person's going to adore your kid. And hopefully that person is someone who's going to be an extra person for your children to love and to love on your children. Obviously, it's hard to have that dynamic come into your life, but hopefully with time, you guys can all get back to that co-parenting dynamic, and everybody and the kiddos can be, well supported and well loved. However, that doesn't always happen, but reality is the parents are the ones that should be parenting the kiddos and hopefully reducing that dynamic.
Well, I think that is sound advice. Now we've talked about a number of different topics here today, and your thoughts on family law, and I think that you have some great ideas to share with everyone today. Is there anything that you thought of while we were doing this interview that we may have missed, or anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, a little bit. We kind of, in the beginning, we were kind of talking about, why I got into family law. And I kind of just stopped that part of the conversation. I'm not really sure why, but I did. And I've been thinking about that over the last couple of weeks, especially. And I think obviously my why has obviously evolved over the years. I've been practicing for 16 years now. Oh God, I'm almost 17. But practicing for quite some time now, and that why has always evolved. But if I step back and look back at the core of my why of family law, and why not environmental law? Why not contracts? Why not something else? Because there's a gazillion areas of law out there that are a lot less emotional than family law. I think the reason why I stay and I really love my area of law and my practice area is because it's so much more than just practicing law. I'm helping these families through these individual dynamics that they're having. And it's super rewarding to know that you've helped people transition through one of the most difficult points of their life. And hopefully you walk by them in the middle of the grocery store and you're like, hey, how are you? And they're happy and they're content and they're doing well, and you've helped guide them through that. And having that dynamic of not only helping them with the law, but also helping them through this rough stage of their life. Obviously not a counselor, not a therapist in any which way, shape, or form, but, helping them go through this process with grace and their chin held up high and giving them strength, often giving people strength that they never had before, is really, really rewarding.
And I think that's what makes what you do so special, because you are seeing people at the hardest part of their lives. You are helping talk them through things. And there's not a lot of areas of the law where you have to be part counselor and really worry about someone's children and everything else. Make sure that everybody gets through one of the most stressful events in someone's life in one piece. So I am certainly glad to have met you, Melissa, and really happy that you're working there at the law firm and really helping everybody out that comes through your door.
Well, thanks, Eric. I appreciate chatting with you.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody that's listening. If anyone does have a question on family law, absolutely call the Stewart Law Group. They are phenomenal. They've got a wonderful team. You've just met a fantastic team member that they have there, attorney Melissa Bower, and she is a great example of the type of person you'll be working with over there. This really empathetic and intelligent and full of great strategies and options if you're going through a family law matter. So thanks for listening in, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a wonderful day, everyone.